If you need boneless, skinless chicken thighs for a recipe, you could either buy a pack of boneless, skinless chicken thighs, or you could buy bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs for much less money, process them yourself, and get free chicken broth, free cooking fat, and free tasty, crispy chicken skin treats. Now, I realize that not everybody has time to bother with breaking down their own meat, but if you don't mind spending a little extra time in the kitchen, or if you're like me and you work from home and you can easily jump up off the couch every few minutes to tend to your chicken skins and your broth, this is a great option. You'll save money, you'll get much tastier chicken broth than the stuff you buy at the store, and you'll have a divine, crispy chicken skin treat to eat afterwards as a reward. So let's get started. Okay, here we have a lovely 10-pack of bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. This is how I like to buy them because it is cheaper overall, and I get to make free chicken broth out of the leftover bones, and I get to make free rendered chicken fat and a tasty treat out of the skins. So in this little video, I'm going to show you how I take these apart, separate the bone from the skin from the meat, and use the meat in a different recipe. And then I'm going to show you how I make broth out of the leftover bones and how I render the skins. This is not like the only way to do it, but this is how I do it. Okay, so as you can see, I'm starting it with the skin side down on the board. This is a very sharp knife. I'm not going to show you how to sharpen knives because I'm not the supreme expert on that. Look up some other video. But anyway, be careful, it's a sharp knife. So what I like to do is I make an incision kind of down the middle where this bone is, and then you can just kind of express and peel that flesh back a little bit. Now you'll notice there's this knobby bone on one end and this other little bone on the other. You want to cut around those, so I kind of saw gently down with my knife on one side, and I'm right-handed, so I do the left side. And as I go, I try to get as close to the bone as I can, but I don't worry too much if I leave some meat on the bone, because as I mentioned earlier, I'm turning these bones into stock, so it's not going to go to waste. Then what I do is, as I gently saw up and down with my knife, maybe you need to come in from the top so you can see that I'm sawing. As I saw up and down with my knife, I'm pulling on this free part, and as you can see, the bone is rolling to the right while I am gently sawing up and down. And I'm trying to avoid cutting through that knob at the top. As you can see, it's not perfect. See, there's still some flesh left on the bone, but again, that's fine. That's going to turn into stock. Now, I look at the remaining meat and I notice that I still have a bit of knuckle here. I almost always do. I just lop that off and save that for the stock. Yeah, I got a little meat off with that, but that's okay. It'll flavor the broth. Oh, and I did this wrong actually, but this is fine. This is a teaching moment. Usually I like to remove the skin first before I debone, but as you can see, it's much easier if you can just get a grip on the chicken. I like to just use the flat side of my knife because this hand is my clean hand. When you're dealing with raw chicken, the most dangerous thing you can do is get a slippery hand around your knife, because then if you slip with your knife, you can cut yourself. So the blade side pointing away from me, I press down with the side and I just tug on the skin. And at some point you're going to get to a part where the skin is more firmly attached to the meat, like right here. What I do when I get there is I just very, very gently with my knife a little bit, and then maybe I come in from the other side. Again, this is why I like to do the skin off first before the bone. I'll show the next one more properly. As you can see, I have this bit up here that's just skin. All right, that was less than perfect, but what you've got is a piece of skin left over and a piece of chicken thigh that is deboned and deskinned. And if you want to, you can clean up and cut off some of the fat, but I don't care. I'm going to put the meat in this container, and I'm going to go ahead and also put the bone and skin in this container because I'm not ready to deal with them just yet. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the way that I prefer to do it, which is removing the skin first. So like I showed you before, you can just kind of put the flat side of your knife down on the chicken and tug at the skin with your hand. Find a little membrane, again, blade away from me. I made that mistake once, and only once is all I needed. A nice trip to the emergency room and a bill of over $1,000 because I live in America, the greatest country on earth. All right, so now I'm left with this bit over here that's just kind of connected. Again, just kind of gently and patiently swipe at it with your knife and it will peel off. And if I get a little meat with that, I don't really care. That's good enough for me. Now is the part where I'm going to take off this bit of fat because it's just, there. Once again, I start in the, flip you, in the middle of the bone, kind of on the middle left, and then gentle sawing motion up and down as I twirl and push the bone. Oof, this one's not cooperating as well. That's okay. There we go. Now it's going. Roll it off. Ta-da! Again, this is not like the best or the most professional way to debone, but it's really fast, and the results are fine for my purposes. So you got deboned chicken thigh, the bone with a little meat on it for our broth, and some skin, which we're going to turn into a tasty treat. Okay, it is the next day, and I have separated all of the meat. These are 10 chicken thighs without the skins and bones into this bowl. I'm going to use this in a recipe in a minute. And then here I have just the bones and the skins. So this is what I'm going to work with right now. Okay, so as for these 10 chicken bones that have little bits of meat left on them, I'm going to just dump them into this pot of water. I'm going to add a little pinch of black peppercorn. And these bay leaves are quite old, so I'm going to add like, I don't know, 5 of them. And now you may be wondering why I'm going to put yogurt and ricotta cheese and cottage cheese in the broth. I'm not going to put those things in the broth. These are just old containers that I've repurposed. And anytime I cut onion and I have like the extra outer layer of the onion that's kind of fibrous, I discard that in a container and I freeze it. And I'm just going to put these scraps directly in the pot as well. Anytime I have onion, or this is celery, the end of a celery. Anytime there's extra onion, celery, or carrot, like carrot tops. Oh, this right here, this is parsnip tops. They're very similar to carrots, so I went ahead and saved the peels and tops. I freeze them in these repurposed containers. And then when I have enough to make broth, I will make broth. I don't know how well you can see this, but that container that I just put in, I also had some frozen raw chicken bones in that as well. If I'm butchering chicken, but I'm not ready to make broth yet, I also just freeze the bones. So this batch of broth is going to have about 20 chicken bones, and then the scraps from scallions and parsnips and carrots and celery and onion. It makes a really nice, virtually free chicken broth. And these empty containers that had the scraps in them, I wash these out, and then I use these to store the broth when it's finished. So I just keep repurposing these. So, you know, there's no exact science. Here is some chicken bones that were cooked. Like I cooked the chicken thighs whole with the bone in, and then I saved these bones after I ate the chicken off of them, and I'm using them also in the broth. So yeah, this particular batch of broth has way more chicken bones in it than I usually have in my broth, so it'll be extra luscious. But yeah, I don't measure anything. I just wait until I've got a fair amount of parts, and then I just put it in a pot of water. You want to make sure that your pot, by the way, has a very heavy bottom to it. If it has a very light bottom, you can easily scorch your broth and ruin it. So make sure it's a heavy bottomed pot. And yeah, I just dump everything in here frozen. I'm going to bring it to a boil and then lower it to a simmer and cook it for like at least 3 hours. Okay, it is about 10 minutes later and my broth is starting to come to the boil. So what I like to do is push everything down just to make sure it's submerged. And if it's not completely submerged, that's not the end of the world. This will break down quite a bit over the next few hours and it will submerge itself. And notice I did not add any salt to this broth. And the reason why is I like the versatility that saltless broth gives me in cooking. If I want to reduce it and have a very, very strong chicken broth, if I added salt to it before that, it would be extremely salty. But if I leave it unsalted, then I can regulate the salt a lot better. But I just have to keep in mind when I'm using this in recipes that it's not salted, so I have to add extra salt to compensate. But anyway, all you have to do now at this point with the broth is lower the heat to like, basically lower it low enough that it is at a gentle simmer. You don't want it like boiling all over the place. You want it to have a little gentle simmer. Cover it as well. Just so the water won't escape. And top it up with water as needed. But yeah, basically just keep it simmering and stir it occasionally just to make sure everything is submerged, and cook it for at least 3 hours, but you can do it even longer. So I can't believe I forgot to do this earlier, but I'm remembering it now. Good thing. So this is an important step for me in making chicken broth. At the very start of the process, preferably, I get a big bowl and I get a strainer, and I put the strainer over the bowl. All it takes is once of putting the strainer directly in the sink and then dumping out the broth into the sink and then crying, no, as it all disappears down the drain, that you will wish that you had done this, okay? It's about an hour and a half since I started the broth. It's at barely a simmer, and as you can see, the veggies and the chicken have sunken down a little bit.
And this is Thalia. Hi, baby. Hi, sweetheart. Do you smell the chicken? Yes, Mommy, I smell the chicken. It's making me very excited.
Okay, the broth is done, and I've let it cool off a little tiny bit. You don't want it to be like scalding hot when you strain it. What I like to do first is I take a spider or slotted spoon, and I take out as much of the solid stuff as I can. Just put it directly in the trash. It smells so good. All right, and then I pour the rest of that into there, which I cannot do with one hand while holding a phone, so you're just gonna have to imagine me doing that. And voila, we've got 6 cups of beautiful, fragrant, homemade chicken broth. And this is how I store my broth. If you want to, you can make a bunch of this and of course can it if you know how to can things and make it shelf stable. But what I do is I just pour it into usually old yogurt containers. Those are my chicken broth containers. I put either parts to become chicken broth, or turkey broth, or duck broth, or whatever kind of bird broth I happen to be working on. So I'm saving about 4 cups of this for a recipe that I'm going to cook in a half hour. And the rest of this, I'm going to put a lid on and put in the freezer once it cools down a little bit more. You don't want to put it into the yogurt container piping hot, incidentally, like these containers are not meant for hot food. And you also don't want to pop this in the microwave to reheat it. You want to thaw it on your countertop when you're ready to use it. This is how I like to render the chicken skins. This is not the only way that you can do this. In fact, usually when people render fat, they boil it in water, and then they let that fat come up to the top and solidify, and then they scrape that off, and then that's the rendered fat. I like to render it in just a skillet. I like cast iron like this, and I'm carefully laying them out. But you really don't have to. I mean, there's not enough room for all 10 of these skins to lay out nicely anyway. As they cook, they are going to shrink a lot. So that's okay. And anyway, the reason I like to render my chicken skins, yeah, I'm not even going to bother putting them on. Anyway, the reason I like to render my chicken skins in a skillet like this is they get nice and crispy. They release all their fat, which I can use in recipes, and then their crispy skins, I add salt to them and eat them, and they're a delicious little treat. Or I leave 1 or 2 of them unsalted and rip it into little pieces, and it makes really nice cat treats.
For this one, hi, Nika. You don't belong on the sink.
So after a few minutes, I don't know if you can hear that, but it's starting to sizzle a little bit and the skin is starting to melt. And yeah, you want to go at a relatively low temperature. I've got it like on medium low right now. You want to very gently and slowly render the fat out. It'll take, a good hour or so. So this is the kind of project you want to do when you can be home and around to watch it.
Look who's helping. Hi, Nika. Are you being a good girl? Are you being a good girl? Yes, you are. I love you.
Okay, it is about 10 minutes later now, and you can really see these skins are really starting to release some water as well as some fat. And they are sticking a little bit at the bottom of the pan. That's because I did not bother greasing the pan, but they will release eventually. But I'm just kind of encouraging them by scraping them. So they're already starting to get a little bit of color in places. I'm just flipping these skins to expose more of the skin to the pan. It's good to keep them moving just so they won't burn. And of course use tongs or a spatula for this task as well. It really doesn't matter. Use whatever you want. All right, and this is about 30 minutes since I started cooking down these skins. As you can see, they really have now released a lot of fat. And just, you know, every 5 to 10 minutes or so I come here and I just kind of check on them and shift them around if need be and flip them over if I feel that they're getting dried out on one side. Oh, somebody has been smelling these and she wants some. I'm sorry, baby girl, but you're diabetic. You don't get any. I know, I'm sorry. A very specific diet. Okay, this is about an hour and a half since I started rendering these. I think I said in the beginning of the video that it takes about an hour. Well, I lied. It depends on how many skins you're doing, and it depends on how high a heat you're using. But see, this is about what we want. The other side is still a little bit fatty. But yeah, these skins, some of them at least, are almost done. But as you can see, some of them still have quite a ways to go. That happens. There are hotter spots in the pan. Some of the ones that have longer to go probably were like towards the top of the pile at the very beginning. And just keep flipping them. Okay, so see this extremely fine foam here that looks sort of like soap lather? That is a good sign that the piece of chicken skin is done rendering. If I flip it over, I see it's really firm and brown. And it's very stiff when I touch it with the fork. So I'm going to call this one done. This is just 2 paper towels folded on top of each other. And any other pieces I find that are done, I'm going to add. And this is kind of the name of the game. You just pick them out as they get done. Yep. And it looks like more than half of them are done. And the ones that you are going to salt and just eat like little treats, it's best to salt them now when they're still quite hot. I'm going to go ahead and salt all of these. So my cats do not need that many treats. I'm going to let these sit and drain for about a minute or two, and then I'm going to eat some because they're delicious. Okay, I need a little pick-me-up, a little treat, so I'm going to have one. I'm sorry, sweetie. That's Thalia, and she has diabetes, so she's on a very specific feeding schedule. These are so, so, so good. You don't want to just sit down and eat a plate of these, but like 1 or 2 chicken skins makes a really tasty little special treat. Okay, the rest of these are done. I'm going to not salt these so I can give them to my cats as treats. And that leaves all of this lovely, flavorful chicken fat left. It looks like I've got maybe a ½ a cup out of this. Once this has cooled down a little bit, I'm going to put it in a jar or a glass container and put it in the fridge and use it for cooking.
Yvain! Not you, Lila. Yvain!
I'm so sorry, Laya. Oh, I'm going to feel mean giving them treats in front of her. I'm going to shut her in a room.
Yvain! Look.
You don't want it? You don't want the handmade artisanal treat that Mommy lovingly prepared for you?
Brat, Nika, would you like it? Nika.
I actually haven't given these little girls what we call chickums very much. Our dearly departed Miney, our little kitten who was a calico, she loved these.
But you want a chicken? There's a good girl.
You'll figure it out.
Yvain, do you want one after all? Here. Want to eat it off the floor? Nika, you still have yours. Look, stupid. It's right there.
It's literally right there. There. Good girls. Okay, the fat has cooled off a bit, but it's still liquid. I like to wait until it's not like super hot, because there is a risk of cracking a jar with a sudden change of temperature. This is just an old pickle jar that I've cleaned out very thoroughly, and it looks kind of like pee. but it's chicken fat. So yeah, I got maybe about a half a cup out of there. I'm gonna keep this in the fridge and use it in recipes. And as for this pan, there's a bunch of deliciousness in there. So I'm gonna clean out this pan by adding probably a little bit of this fat and frying some potatoes in it. That's my absolute favorite way to clean a cast iron skillet that has a little bit of meat residue in it.